I was sitting at my kitchen table with my morning coffee when the certified letter arrived. The envelope looked official, stamped with county seals and legal jargon that made my stomach drop. Inside was a notice that made my blood run cold. A tax lien had been filed against my property for $35,000 in unpaid HOA fees and penalties. My hands started shaking as I read the threatening language about potential foreclosure if the matter wasn't resolved within 30 days. The problem was I had never missed a single HOA payment in the 5 years I'd lived in Maple Ridge Estates. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this nightmare. 6 months earlier, life in our quiet suburban neighborhood had been relatively peaceful. Sure, we had an HOA, but most of US figured it was just there to keep property values stable and make sure nobody painted their house neon green. That was before Karen Middleton got elected as HOA president. Karen was a woman in her early 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a wardrobe that screamed middle management. She had moved to our neighborhood 2 years prior and immediately appointed herself an official enforcer of every rule, regulation, and community standard she could find. Karen's first target had been my front yard landscaping. I had planted some native wildflowers along my walkway, thinking they looked charming and would attract butterflies. Within a week, I received my first violation notice, typed on official HOA letterhead and delivered with the kind of passive-aggressive politeness that could cut glass. The wildflowers, according to Karen, violated Section 12.4 of our community guidelines, which required all landscaping to maintain a uniform and traditional appearance. She demanded I replace them with approved plants from a list she had personally curated. Most of my neighbors would have caved immediately. Karen had a reputation for making life miserable for anyone who crossed her. She would send follow-up notices, schedule surprise property inspections, and even take photos of alleged violations to present at monthly HOA meetings. But something about her tone and her obvious power trip rubbed me the wrong way. I had read her HOA covenant from cover to cover, and nowhere did it specify that native plants were prohibited, so I politely declined her request and kept my wildflowers. That decision turned me into Karen's personal nemesis. Over the next few months, the violation notices multiplied like rabbits. My mailbox was apparently positioned too far from the curb. The small decorative solar lights along my driveway were deemed non-compliant with community lighting standards. Even my choice of mulch became a subject of heated HOA board discussion. Each notice came with increasingly hefty fines, starting at $25 and eventually reaching several hundred per violation. The breaking point came when Karen issued a notice claiming my property was in violation of community maintenance standards because I had a single dandelion growing in my otherwise pristine lawn. The fine was $500 and the notice threatened legal action if I didn't immediately hire a professional landscaping service to bring my property into compliance. That's when I realized Karen wasn't just power hungry, she was completely unhinged. What I didn't know was that Karen had been secretly escalating her campaign behind the scenes while I was dealing with her endless stream of bogus violations. She had been researching ways to force me out of the neighborhood entirely. She had discovered that property owners could file tax liens for unpaid HOA fees, and in her twisted mind, this seemed like the perfect weapon. Using her position as how President Karen had created fictitious invoices for emergency landscaping assessments, community improvement fees, and administrative penalties that totaled over $35,000. The fraudulent documents were professionally crafted and bore official-looking seals and signatures. Karen had even backdated some of the invoices to make it appear as though I had been ignoring legitimate fees for over a year. She filed the tax lien through the county recorder's office knowing that most clerks wouldn't question paperwork that appeared legitimate and came from an HOA president. The lien was designed to cloud my property title and potentially force a foreclosure sale if I couldn't prove the charges were false. When I received that certified letter, my first instinct was panic. A tax lien is serious business, and legal language made it clear that my home was at risk. I immediately called the county office to inquire about the charges, but the clerk could only confirm that a lien had been properly filed by the Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. The details of the underlying debt weren't their concern. They simply processed the paperwork as submitted. Realizing I needed professional help, I contacted Patricia Chen, a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. Patricia was a sharp woman in her 40s who had built her practice defending homeowners against exactly this kind of abuse. When I explained my situation, her expression grew increasingly serious. She had seen cases of HOA overreach before, but filing fraudulent tax liens crossed a line into criminal territory. Patricia immediately requested copies of all my HOA payment records, violation notices, and correspondence with Karen. As we spread the documents across her conference table, a pattern emerged that made my stomach churn. The invoices cited in the tax lien didn't match any legitimate HOA communications I had received. The dates were wrong. The fee structures didn't align with our community's established dues, and several of the alleged violations referenced HOA bylaws that didn't exist in our original covenant. More disturbing was Patricia's discovery that I wasn't Karen's only victim. Through her network of legal contacts, Patricia learned that two other homeowners in different neighborhoods had recently contacted attorneys about suspicious tax liens filed by their respective HOA presidents. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidental. Each lien involved inflated fees, backdated invoices, and homeowners who had previously clashed with their HOA leadership. Patricia's investigation revealed the shocking scope of Karen's scheme. Using public records requests, we discovered that Karen had filed a total of 7 fraudulent tax liens over the past 18 months, targeting homeowners across 3 different communities where she held HOA leadership positions. The total amount of fraudulent claims exceeded $200,000, and in at least 2 cases, homeowners had paid settlement amounts rather than fight the liens in court. Armed with this evidence, Patricia contacted the district attorney's office to file a formal complaint. The prosecutor assigned to the case, Michael Rodriguez, was a veteran attorney who specialized in white-collar fraud. When Patricia presented the documentation showing Karen's pattern of abuse, Rodriguez immediately recognized the severity of the situation. Filing false liens wasn't just a civil matter. It constituted criminal fraud, forgery, and potentially extortion. The investigation moved quickly once law enforcement got involved. Detective Sarah Kim from the County Sheriff's Economic Crimes Unit began interviewing Karen's victims and collecting additional evidence. What they found was even more damning than Patricia's initial research had suggested. Karen had been systematically targeting homeowners who challenged her authority, using her knowledge of HOA procedures and county filing systems to weaponize the legal system against her personal enemies. Detective Kim's investigation revealed that Karen had created an entire infrastructure for her fraud scheme. She had opened a separate bank account under the name of a fictitious HOA management company, complete with professional letterhead and fake business licenses. When homeowners called to dispute charges, Karen would direct them to a voicemail system she controlled, then claimed their calls had never been received. She had even created fake board meeting minutes to support her fraudulent fee assessments. The most shocking discovery came when investigators searched Karen's home office. They found detailed files on over 20 homeowners, complete with photographs of their properties, copies of their mortgage documents, and handwritten notes about potential vulnerabilities. Karen had been conducting surveillance on her neighbors, looking for ways to exploit minor violations or personal conflicts for financial gain. 3 weeks after I received that terrifying tax lien notice, I watched from my front window as two sheriff's deputies knocked on Karen's door. She answered wearing her usual business attire, probably expecting to intimidate whoever was bothering her. Instead, she found herself being read her Miranda rights and placed under arrest for multiple felony counts of fraud, forgery, and filing false liens. The scene was surreal as neighbors gathered on their lawns to watch Karen being escorted to a patrol car in handcuffs. This was the same woman who had terrorized our community with endless violation notices and threats of legal action. Now she was the one facing serious legal consequences, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone who had suffered under her reign of petty tyranny. The charges against Karen were extensive and carried significant penalties. The district attorney's office filed 7 counts of felony fraud, each carrying a potential sentence of up to 5 years in prison. Additional charges include forgery of legal documents, filing false liens, and operating an unlicensed business. The total potential prison time exceeded 30 years, and the financial penalties could reach hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and restitution. Karen's arrest made local news, and the story quickly spread through social media as other victims came forward to share their experiences. The woman who had once wielded her HOA presidency like a weapon now faced professional ruin, criminal conviction, and financial devastation as she sat in the back of that patrol car, her perfectly styled hair disheveled and her authoritative demeanor completely shattered. Karen finally understood what it felt like to be truly powerless. Her shocked expression and visible trembling made it clear that she had never imagined her scheme would collapse so completely, leaving her facing decades in prison for her abuse of